Saren Voss knew she was in deep trouble the moment the floor gave way beneath her boots. One minute she was admiring the ancient alien architecture, all ominous and overcomplicated, thinking it'd make a great backdrop for a cheap sci-fi flick. The next, she was hurtling through a chute like some rejected idea for Universal Studios' least popular amusement ride. It ended with a thud, her pride bruised more than anything else. "Welcome to the gladiatorial games," a disembodied voice announced, all smug and smugger. "Please remain calm." Calm? Yeah, right. Saren had about as much chance of that as a snowball surviving in an interplanetary barbecue. Her team landed beside her in a tangled heap of limbs and confusion. There was Cal, the muscle, who looked as out of place in his combat armor as a bull in a china shop. Next to him was Del, the group's techie, who had the constant aura of a man who'd rather be fixing a toaster. And then there was Bly, their medic, whose bedside manner was only slightly more comforting than a slap in the face. "Where the hell are we?" Cal grumbled, pulling himself upright like a bear that had just been kicked out of hibernation, only less graceful. "Welcome to the arena," Saren said, gesturing to their new surroundings. "The floor's lava, the stakes are your lives, and losing is not an option." They stood in the middle of a vast, circular space. The walls shimmered with a dull metallic sheen, while the ceiling stretched up into darkness, suggesting either infinity or just a really bad lighting choice. AI overseers hovered around, their designs looking like a blender and a vacuum cleaner had a love child. "We've been hijacked by metallic vacuum cleaners," Del said, managing to sound both awed and irritated. "My life's ambition is fulfilled. At least they clean up after themselves," Bly added dryly, adjusting her medkit. "Participants," the voice continued, "your first challenge awaits. Survive, adapt, conquer." "Catchy," Saren muttered. "Sounds like it should be on a motivational poster, right next to a cat hanging onto a branch." The floor began to shift again, panels sliding aside to reveal a series of obstacles and hazards. Spinning blades, fiery pits, and what looked suspiciously like a laser grid. "I've had nightmares less cliched than this," Cal noted. "And a lot less sharp, too. Just think of it as." "Extreme team building," Saren suggested, trying to muster up some enthusiasm. "If we don't die, we might learn something." "Like what?" Del asked. "How to apply for posthumous awards, or how to reassemble yourself after being diced," Bly added, eyeing the spinning blades with professional interest. The overhead voice chimed in again. "Your opponents will enter in 3, 2, 1. Doors on the other side of the arena slid open with a theatrical hiss, revealing a selection of alien species that seemed to have been chosen for their potential to ruin anyone's day. Some were hulking brutes, others were lean and deadly, and all of them looked like they'd kill for a decent sandwich. "Oh good," Saren said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "A welcoming committee. I don't suppose talking things out is an option?" Cal asked. "Only if you speak fluent violence," Saren replied, drawing her weapon, a sleek battered plasma pistol that seemed permanently stuck in high power mode and low reliability setting. The aliens advanced, their intentions clear in the universal language of "come get some." "Right," Saren muttered, raising her pistol. "Let's show them what humanity's made of." The battle was chaos incarnate. Plasma bolts streaked across the arena, accompanied by the sizzling hum of lasers and the guttural roars of aliens who, Saren assumed, were cursing in their native tongues. "Cover me," Del shouted, ducking behind a barrier that looked as sturdy as a politician's promise. "With what?" Cal retorted. "My good intentions." Bly was in her element, dodging and weaving through the chaos, administering first aid to anyone unfortunate enough to get in the way of an alien fist or blade. "I've got a solution for everything," she declared, injecting Cal with something that made him wince. "Except decapitation. So try to keep your head on, all right." Saren fired at anything that moved, each shot punctuated by a sarcastic commentary on the universe's sense of humor. "This is what we get for exploring alien temples, folks. Next time, let's just go to a nice, safe beach." Amidst the fray, One of the AI overseers floated by serenely, like a tour guide in hell. Remember, survival is contingent upon teamwork and adaptability. Thanks for the tip, Saren snapped, taking aim at an alien that looked like a cross between a crab and a bodybuilder. I'll be sure to send it to my memoirs. The fight dragged on, a blur of movement, noise, and the occasional existential crisis. Just when the humans thought they had a handle on things, the arena shifted again, introducing new hazards, acid jets and collapsing floors, because clearly life wasn't interesting enough. I hate this place, Del muttered, narrowly avoiding a spray of acid. It's like it was designed by a sadistic game show host. We're learning a lot, Bly countered, patching up a particularly nasty wound on Saren's arm. Like how much we hate being alive. And how to improvise, Saren added, her voice a mix of determination and frustration. Adapt, conquer, survive, right? The aliens, apparently just as determined to make everyone's day miserable, didn't relent. They pressed the attack, some even using the arena's hazards to their advantage. It was a ridiculous dance of death, one that seemed to have no end in sight. But humans, being the stubborn creatures they are, refused to give in. Saren's team fought with everything they had, relying on wit and desperation to pull them through. This is what separates us from the animals, Saren shouted over the din. Sheer bloody-mindedness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of combat, the alien forces began to falter. The humans pushed back, exploiting the weaknesses they'd painstakingly discovered during the fight. I think they're retreating, Cal said, disbelief etched on his face. Or regrouping, Del suggested. Because why would anything be easy? As the dust began to settle, the humans found themselves once again alone in the arena, bruised, battered, but paradoxically invigorated. Well, Saren said, catching her breath. That was fun. In a I'd rather gouge my eyes out kind of way. Think we'll get medals? Bly asked, her tone heavy with irony. More like a bill for property damage, Del replied, examining his battered tech gear. The AI voice returned, its tone no less infuriatingly serene. Congratulations on surviving your first trial. Prepare for the next challenge. Saren glanced at her team, seeing the exhaustion and determination etched into their faces. They were alive for now, and that was enough. Get ready, everyone, she said, offering a wry smile. After all, what's life without a little excitement? The arena began to shift again, preparing for another round of chaos. And as the humans steeled themselves for whatever came next, Saren couldn't help but think of how absurdly fitting it was that their survival depended not just on strength or skill, but on their ability to laugh in the face of certain death. Let's get this over with, she muttered, raising her pistol once more. I've got plans later. With that, the arena roared back to life, ready to test humanity's resilience once again. And as the humans charged forward, they did so with the knowledge that, in this twisted game, their greatest weapon was the simple, indomitable will to survive. The arena's floor slithered again, revealing another delightful set of death traps as if the first round wasn't enough of a reason to never visit. Saren Voss, having survived the initial welcome party, had expected some respite. Instead, she got a routine that seemed designed by someone who hated life, or at least people living it. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Saren muttered, eyeing the latest hazards with something akin to admiration mixed with dread. A series of spikes began rhythmically thrusting from the ground like eager salesmen at a bad convention. Cal, ever the rock of pessimistic optimism, surveyed the scene. Seems like they're just getting warmed up. Anyone else feel like a kebab? Speak for yourself, Del quipped, fiddling with his gear that looked like it had seen better days, and by better that meant any day before they arrived here. You're bigger than a kebab, maybe a roast, Bly snorted, adjusting her medkit. If we survive this, I'm recommending a safer career. Maybe lion taming. Hey, Cal protested, isn't that supposed to be a step up in danger? Exactly, Bly said, her deadpan delivery as sharp as the spikes beneath them. As they navigated this latest manifestation of someone's overfunded nightmare, Pax Rylan emerged from the shadows, looking like a man who'd stumbled onto the wrong set. He was the kind of engineer who'd probably started life with a wrench in one hand and a soldering iron in the other. "Nice of you to drop in, Pax. Need a hand?" Saren asked, her pistol at the ready, though she'd be more assured if it didn't occasionally make ominous clicking noises. Pax glanced at the arena's latest machinations with the same casual interest one might reserve for a slightly unpleasant weather forecast. "Seems like someone's been watching too many old sci-fi flicks. Yeah. Well, this isn't exactly a rerun," Saren said, shooting an advancing alien with a precision that screamed experience. "Try not to get too distracted, all right? Relax," Pax replied, producing a makeshift device from his satchel that looked like it could either save their lives or end them prematurely. "I've got a plan. Please tell me it's not wait and see what happens," Bly commented while Cal parried a particularly aggressive alien with his fist, the noise of bone meeting bone, a terrible symphony of impending doom. "Nope," Pax said, wiring his gadget with nimble fingers. "I call it detonate and evacuate. Could use a catchier name, but we're on a schedule." Saren spared him a glance, her expression caught between a grimace and a smile. "You sure that thing's not going to blow us up too?" Pax grinned, a glint of manic confidence in his eyes. "I'd say there's a 50-50 chance, but I'm feeling lucky. Feeling lucky's gotten us this far," Cal said, dispatching another alien with the enthusiasm of a man whose patience had run out somewhere between breakfast and lunch. The arena continued its relentless assault. New aliens poured in, each more eager than the last to test the mettle of these strange, defiant humans. A particularly large creature, reminiscent of a walking slab of granite, lumbered towards them. "All right, team, heads up," Saren barked, gesturing towards the newcomer. "Our new friend looks like he skipped leg day, but not much else." The team scattered, dodging and weaving with a grace only desperation and fear could inspire. Pax's fingers danced over his device, a series of LED flickering with alarming urgency. "Almost there," he muttered. "Just need a few more seconds. Seconds we might not have," Dell said, taking cover behind a jagged outcrop while firing off shots with growing impatience. "Anyone got a spare miracle fresh out?" Bly replied, ducking beneath a swinging alien fist. "Ask me next week." Saren took a deep breath, centering herself as she lined up her next shot. "Pax, whatever you're doing, do it faster." There was a pause, the kind that precedes either triumph or utter disaster. Then, with a flourish and what might have been an ill-timed wink, Pax activated his device. Fire in the hole. The arena erupted in a cacophony of chaos, explosions and alien cries mingling in an orchestra no one wanted front-row seats to. Saren's team, momentarily stunned by the sheer audacity of survival, quickly regrouped. "Well, that did something," Cal said, dusting off his combat armor, now sporting a few new dents and scorch marks. "Namely, not killing us. Low bar, but we cleared it," Pax said, looking far too pleased with himself. "Remind me never to doubt you again," Bly said, eyeing the remnants of their adversaries with wary respect. "Just another day at the office," Pax said with a shrug. The AI overseers, apparently unbothered by the carnage, drifted overhead like judgmental clouds. "Congratulations, participants. You have temporarily survived. Prepare for the next phase." "Oh great," Dell muttered. "I was just starting to get comfortable with the idea of dying here. Everyone all right?" Saren asked, looking around at her team. They were bruised, bloody, but breathing, a testament to human ingenuity and the will to not die a horrible, arena-based death. "Survived worse with a hangover," Bly said, checking her supplies. "Speak for yourself," Cal grunted, flexing a shoulder that had taken more hits than he'd like to admit. "I'm pretty sure I've used up my 9 lives." Saren nodded, the weight of the inevitable next challenge pressing on her shoulders like a particularly annoying troll. "We need to start thinking smarter. Relying on luck and Pax's explosives is a gamble I'd rather not press." "Then what's the plan, boss?" Pax asked, still brimming with the confidence only an engineer with a penchant for destruction could muster. Saren thought for a moment, taking in the scene of devastation they'd so artistically crafted. We use their own system against them. They've got to have vulnerabilities like an off switch. Cal suggested, hopeful. Or a way to talk to their manager, Bly added. Or both, Dell quipped, adjusting his gear and trying to coax more life out of it. Maybe a complaint card, we'll make it work, Saren said, determination sharpening her voice. We have to. As the arena began to reset itself in preparation for their next ordeal, Saren's team huddled together, the camaraderie forged in fire and panic as tangible as the smoke still hanging in the air. Ready for round two? Saren asked, though it was less a question and more a rallying cry. Ready as we'll ever be, Pax replied, his eyes alight with the thrill of chaos and creation. The ground shifted beneath them, a reminder that this strange, deadly place was as alive as they were, if alive meant being a psychotic death trap with a flair for the dramatic. All right, team. Let's show these bastards what humanity's really made of. With weapons ready and a plan half-formed, they stepped forward into whatever fresh hell awaited them. For in this cruel game, survival wasn't just about outlasting their enemies. It was about outthinking them, outwitting them, and doing so with the kind of reckless abandon only humans could muster. And as they charged into the fray, one thought lingered in Saren's mind, as darkly humorous as it was motivating. At least I'll never have to go on another team-building retreat after this. The arena's walls spun with the anticipation of new horrors, seemingly eager to test the mettle of its human contestants. The floor shifted and bucked, revealing hidden depths of ingenious malice. Saren and her team braced themselves, each member prepared for the madness to come. What's the worst that could happen? Dell asked, half joking, half serious. Ask me when we're not surrounded by murder machines, Saren replied, adjusting her grip on her weapon. The team moved forward, ducking and dodging the arena's latest assaults, acid jets, swinging blades, and errant bolts of energy that crackled with malevolent intent. It was, in a word, ridiculous, like a bad dream that never ended, only escalated. Reminds me of my last breakup, Cal said, sidestepping a perilous trap that looked suspiciously like an oversized mousetrap. Lots of screaming and swearing, but not a lot of progress. Bly laughed, the sound sharp and surprising amidst the chaos. You sure know how to pick him. Focus, people, Pax called out, eyes scanning for weaknesses, opportunities. We need to find a way to turn this to our advantage. Saren led the charge, weaving through the arena's labyrinthine chaos with the practiced ease of someone who had long since abandoned the notion of safety. Pax, can you rig something up? Pax nodded, eyes alight with the kind of manic enthusiasm that only came from facing certain doom. Give me a minute. Maybe two. Take your time, Dell said dryly, ducking beneath an errant laser. We've got all day, trust me, Pax replied, already assembling a makeshift contraption from the assorted bits and pieces he carried like a magician with a death wish. This'll be worth it. Saren glanced at her team, bruised but undeterred, and felt a spark of hope, dangerous, reckless, but undeniably there. All right, everyone. Let's get to work. As the arena continued its relentless assault, the team fought back with every ounce of grit and determination they had. And as they battled through the chaos, one thought united them all. They would survive, not just because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because, in the end, there was nothing more human than that. And if they had to do it with a smile and a snarky comment or two, well, that was just part of the package. Saren crouched behind a hunk of twisted metal that used to be an alien, the smell of burnt circuits mingling with the fresh scent of their recent miracle. Her team, a ragtag collection of humanity's best-worst options, gathered around with the wariness of soldiers at a peace summit, expecting everything to blow up at any moment. All right, let's summarize, she said, trying to ignore the AI overseers hovering above like bored gods. We've survived another round of cosmic dodgeball, but I'm betting our luck's on the same clock as my patience. Cal nodded, prodding the alien remains with his boot. These things are starting to look less like enemies and more like failed science experiments. What the hell are they feeding on? Misery and shattered dreams. Del offered, his rifle resting on his shoulder like it was the only friend he had left. Well, if it's food, maybe it's something we can work with, Pax said, eyes gleaming with that all-too-familiar glint of a lunatic with a plan. What if we could use it against them? Bly snorted, leaning against a chunk of arena debris, her medkit swinging like a poorly chosen accessory. In case you haven't noticed, we're a bit short on culinary supplies. Plus, I'm not sure if intergalactic food poisoning is on my bucket list. What? You don't want to add alien chef to your resume? Pax shot back, already sorting through his endless supply of gadgets and doodads, looking for something that might pass for kitchen equipment or a bomb, depending on the angle. Let's focus, Saren interjected, her voice a hard line against the chaos around them. We need to figure out what's making these things tick, or talk, or whatever the hell sound alien biology makes. Why don't we just ask them? Cal suggested, waving at a particularly nasty corpse. Hey, buddy, any dietary preferences we should know about? Bly shook her head, a grin tugging at her lips despite the dire circumstances. I think they are on a strict no-humor diet. Pax, who had been fiddling with a small device that looked suspiciously like a hand blender, finally looked up. All right, if these aliens have a food source, it's likely centralized. That means somewhere in this death trap there's a kitchen, or a pantry, or at least a vending machine. Great. Just what we need, a galactic version of Master Chef, Del muttered. Saren sighed. Look, if we can find this food supply, maybe we can figure out how to manipulate it. If they eat, they have needs. And if they have needs, we can exploit them. You're saying we poison the stew? Bly asked, raising an eyebrow. Or steal the recipe, Pax added, enthusiasm creeping into his voice. Either way, it beats waiting for the next batch of interstellar idiots to try and kill us. Cal scratched his head, a gesture that seemed almost out of place amidst the chaos. So, we're hunting for space rations now. Fantastic. I always wanted to explore the dietary habits of homicidal aliens. The arena groaned, a mechanical sigh that reverberated through the floor, reminding them all that the clock was ticking. Saren wiped the sweat from her brow and stood, determination etched into every line of her face. All right, team. We've got a job to do. Together, they moved with the cautious optimism of people who knew they were on the verge of a very bad idea. The arena was a labyrinth of malevolent intent, but that had never stopped them before. And as they navigated the shifting corridors, Saren felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared feel in a long time. Hope. Keep your eyes peeled, she warned, leading the way through the dimly lit passages. And remember, if it smells like chicken, run. Pax laughed, a sound that was far too cheerful for the situation. We could always deep fry it and hope for the best. Deep fry that, Del said, pointing at a skulking creature that seemed more fungus than foe, its eyes glowing with the intelligence of a light bulb. Any thoughts? Bly adjusted her medkit, her expression a mix of curiosity and dread. Well, it's either an appetizer or an allegory for the state of the universe. They pressed on, Pax taking point as they meandered through the corridors, his gadgets leading the way like a high-tech divining rod. The walls seemed to close in on them, psychic pressure mounting with every step. Anyone else feel like they are about to be greeted by a very hungry, very angry chef? Cal asked, flexing his fingers around his weapon. As long as they don't want us as the main course, I'm cool with it, Bly replied, adjusting her grip on her own gun. Finally, they stumbled into a chamber that was less of a kitchen and more of a biohazard zone. The walls pulsed with an eerie green light, and the air was thick with the pungent aroma of alien cuisine. In the center, a series of large vats bubbled ominously, their contents a mystery that none of them were particularly eager to solve. Well, here we are, Pax announced, unnecessarily. Welcome to Hell's cafeteria. Saren wrinkled her nose, surveying the vats. All right, Pax, what do you think? Can you figure out what they're putting into those things? Let's see, he said, rubbing his hands together with the glee of a mad scientist. I'll take a look. The rest of you keep an eye out for any unwanted dinner guests. As Pax set to work, the others spread out, guarding the entrances and exits like bouncers at a particularly exclusive club. The mood was tense, the air thick with anticipation and the sulphurous stench of whatever was cooking. Smells like a bad idea, Dell muttered, peering into the shadows. Bad ideas are our specialty, Cal replied, a grin on his face that was more defiance than humor. Bly checked her medkit for the 100th time, her eyes scanning the room for any signs of movement. So, if we're caught, do we pretend we're health inspectors? Sure, Cal said, chuckling. Right before they try to turn us into the blue plate special, Pax, oblivious to the banter, was in his element, poking and prodding the bubbling concoctions like a chef with a death wish. Finally, he looked up, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. Got it. I think I can whip up something that'll mess with their biology. We just need a way to get it into the vats without becoming part of the menu. Saren bit her lip, considering. We need a distraction, something big enough to draw their attention away from this place. I volunteer as tribute, Cal said, raising his hand. I've always wanted to be the hero of a disaster movie. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Saren replied, shaking her head. We need something that won't get us all killed in the process. Why not use the overseers? Dell suggested, nodding towards the tiny mechanical sentinels hovering in the air. They're always watching. Maybe we can use them to our advantage. Bly grinned, a wicked idea forming. What if we lure them into a trap? Use their own surveillance against them, like an intergalactic flash mob? Pax asked, already on board with whatever plan was forming. Exactly, Saren said, nodding. If we can get the overseers to focus on something else, we can make our move here. The team huddled together, their whispers a murmur of conspiracy and hope, as they mapped out the details of their next gamble. Pax would create a diversion using his trusty bag of tricks, and the rest of them would execute their plan with the precision of a military operation or a very well-organized pub crawl. All right, people, Saren said, her voice steady, her resolve unshakable. This is our chance. Let's make it count. With a final nod, they split up, each member moving with the purpose of someone who had nothing left to lose. Cal and Bly took up positions near the vats, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice, while Dell and Pax prepared to set their plan into motion. Ready, Pax? Cal asked, his voice low, his eyes fixed on the shimmering overseers hovering above. Born ready, Pax replied, a grin splitting his face. Let's give them a show they won't forget. With a flick of his wrist, Pax activated a series of devices, each one designed to create chaos and confusion. The effect was immediate. Lights flashed, alarms blared, and the overseers scattered, their tiny forms darting through the air like startled birds. Go, go, go! Saren yelled, the adrenaline firing through her veins like rocket fuel. Cal and Bly moved quickly, working together to pour Pax's concoction into the vats. The liquid hissed and bubbled, mingling with the alien stew in a display that was part chemistry experiment, part culinary disaster. Now we wait, Bly said, stepping back, her heart pounding in her chest. Let's hope they have a low tolerance for spicy food, Cal quipped, joining her. They regrouped with Saren and Pax, hearts racing, sweat beading on their brows. The overseers were still buzzing, the arena alive with the sound of chaos, their chaos. Think it'll work? Dell asked, his voice calm despite the storm raging around them. It better, Pax replied, his confidence only slightly shaken. Because if it doesn't, we're fresh out of ideas. Saren nodded, her eyes locked on the vats as if willing them to work. Whatever happens, we did our best. And if it goes south, we'll go down fighting and cracking jokes, Cal added, a wry grin on his face. Always, Bly agreed, her smile a flicker of light in the darkness. And as the arena continued to churn, the overseers buzzing frantically above, Saren's team stood together, ready for whatever came next. In that moment, they were more than just survivors. They were warriors, rebels, fighters. They were human. When the overseers decided to crank the difficulty dial to 11, Saren Voss didn't bat an eye. She'd seen AI overseers upgrade their sadistic playgrounds before, and if anything, she was almost grateful for the chance to test just how badly they wanted to kill her this time. Maybe they'd finally be creative. The arena shifted with an ominous lurch, as if some unseen giant had decided to shake out the crumbs of humanity littering its surface, and the team found themselves standing at the edge of their new playground. "Welcome to the jungle," Cal muttered, staring into the thick fog that had rolled in, smelling faintly of burnt cheese and regret. "Great," Del said, his rifle slung over his shoulder like a lazy companion. "Now they're trying to poison us with atmosphere." Pax, ever the optimist, peered through his visor, fiddling with the settings. "At least it's not raining acid." "Yet, give it time," Bly replied dryly, her eyes following a series of jagged rocks that jutted from the ground like the bony fingers of a particularly unfriendly neighbor. "I'm sure that's on the menu." Saren took a deep breath, the air as thick as porridge and about as appetizing. "All right, team, keep it together. We've got no choice but to push through this and hope we come out the other side with all our limbs still attached. Hope is the first step on the road to disappointment," Cal said, quoting some ancient philosopher or possibly a particularly pessimistic fortune cookie. "But I'm game." The fog was more than a visual obstruction. It was a psychological weapon, magnifying every sound into 100 whispering threats. The overseers hovered above, their presence a silent reminder that everything was being watched, every misstep recorded for posterity or just for their own cruel amusement. "Anyone else feel like they're the star of a really bad reality show?" Pax asked, checking his gear with the nervous energy of a man who knew that the only thing standing between him and a particularly messy death was his knack for tinkering with dangerous toys. "More like the punchline of a cosmic joke," Del said, scanning the area with practiced ease. "And the universe isn't known for its sense of humor." They pressed onward, the ground beneath their feet soft and treacherous, like walking on a sponge that had seen better days. Every step was a gamble, every breath a reminder of just how precarious their situation was. But if there was one thing Saren's team excelled at, it was turning the tables on whatever fate threw their way. "Keep your eyes open," Saren warned, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "And if anything looks remotely edible, assume it's trying to kill you, or worse, trying to recruit us for an intergalactic cooking show," Pax added, his grin a flash of white in the murky gloom. They trudged forward, the overseer's presence a constant, oppressive weight. But it wasn't just the AI that loomed over them. There was the unspoken tension, a crackling undercurrent that came from too many close calls and not enough respite. Saren could feel it, the strain on her team, the weariness in their eyes. She had to keep them moving, keep them focused before the cracks widened into chasms. "Cal, you're with me," Saren said, gesturing to a path that wound through the rocks. "Bly, Pax, stay close to Del. We'll regroup at the clearing, splitting up in a horror show scenario," Cal said, raising an eyebrow. "Brave or stupid, both," Saren replied, her tone brooking no argument. "But it's what we've got." The fog wrapped around them like a shroud as they moved, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional nervous cough and the squelch of boots in mud. Saren's mind raced, chewing over plans and possibilities, always searching for the next move, the next opportunity to cheat the overseers at their own game. "Do you ever think maybe they're just trying to teach us something?" Cal asked, breaking the silence. "Like what?" "How to die creatively," Saren replied. "Maybe," Cal mused, "or maybe it's a lesson in futility. How to resist in the face of insurmountable odds." "I'd rather have a lesson in how to turn the odds in our favor," Saren said, her eyes scanning the fog for any signs of movement. "I don't plan on becoming a statistic." They reached the clearing, a wide expanse of slick grass and scattered debris, and stopped to catch their breath. Saren could see the strain etched into Cal's features, the way his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his weapon. They all felt it, the slow creep of exhaustion that came from too many nights on edge, too many days spent fighting for survival. Sometimes I think they're just waiting for us to break, Cal said quietly. They are, Saren replied, her voice firm. But we're not going to give them the satisfaction. The overseers buzzed in the distance, a constant reminder of their presence, of the stakes of their brutal game. But Saren refused to be cowed. She'd been through hell and back, and she wasn't about to let a bunch of floating eyeballs dictate her fate. All right, let's circle back to the others, she said, steeling herself for the trek through the fog. And remember, if anything jumps out at you, shoot first, question your sanity later. They retraced their steps, each movement a delicate dance between caution and urgency. Saren's mind whirled with strategies, with thoughts of her team and the responsibilities she shouldered. She couldn't afford to falter, not now, not when they were so close to, well, something. She wasn't sure what victory looked like anymore, but she knew it didn't involve ending up as an overseer's footnote. When they regrouped with Del, Bly, and Pax, she was greeted with weary nods and a small, shared sense of relief. It was enough to buoy her spirits, to remind her that they were still in the fight. Any sign of a way out? Pax asked, breaking the silence. Not yet, Saren replied, but we keep moving. We can't let them wear us down. Right, Bly said, her voice tinged with determination. Just another day on the cosmic treadmill. And we're the hamsters, Del said, his tone resigned but not defeated. The overseers seemed to sense the shift, the renewed resolve in the team, and the fog began to dissipate, revealing the next stage of the arena's challenges. Saren could see the glint of metal, the promise of more traps and trials, and she felt the familiar thrill of defiance. Onward into the mouth of madness, Cal said, gesturing grandly. More like the mouth of mediocrity, Pax replied, his grin infectious. We'll get through this, one bad joke at a time. With renewed purpose they advanced, the overseer's gaze never leaving them, the promise of danger as constant as the beating of their hearts. And as they moved deeper into the arena, the fog began to clear from their minds as well, replaced by a singular focus, survival. It wasn't going to be easy. It never was. But they weren't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting for each other, for the bonds forged in the crucible of shared adversity. In that moment, they were more than just a team. They were a family, bound by the scars they bore and the determination that drove them forward. Saren knew that the overseers would never understand that. They saw only numbers, only the patterns of life and death. But Saren and her team were more than statistics, more than the sum of their failures and triumphs. They were human, and that was something the overseers could never replicate or control. All right, team, Saren said, her voice carrying the weight of command and camaraderie. Keep your wits about you. We've got a long road ahead, but we'll walk it together. And as they pressed on into the unknown, Saren couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. It was a small thing, fragile and fleeting, but it was enough. Enough to keep them moving, enough to keep them fighting. Enough to remind them that even in the darkest corners of the universe, humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The fog clung to the ground like an old, grudging ex. It was reluctant to let go, though the sparks of metal traps and hidden hazards glimmered with malicious intent, promising more than just a bad day. Saren Voss led her ragtag band of misfits with all the enthusiasm of a cat-herding parade marshal, determined but realizing the futility of every step. Cal was beside her, expression as sour as the smell of the mist. Remind me again why we're still doing this. Did someone forget to pay the cable bill, and now we're stuck entertaining the overseers? Saren shot him a sideways glance. Because we're stubborn bastards who don't like being told what to do, that's why. Or maybe we just enjoy the smell of impending doom in the morning, Del deadpanned, slinging his rifle with the grace of someone who could shoot you with his eyes closed and still hit. Could be worse, Pax chimed in optimistically, adjusting his visor with a smile that suggested he saw the glass as perpetually half full. At least we haven't run into any of those failed science experiments today, Bly snorted. You say that now, but give it 5 minutes and we'll be up to our necks in tentacles or worse. They stumbled into a clearing that seemed to have been designed for maximum discomfort: sharp rocks, uneven footing, and the occasional suspiciously quiet puddle. Saren stopped, her eyes scanning the area, her mind a calculated whirl of what to dos and how the hells. "All right, pit stop," she announced, trying to sound more in control than she felt. The team dropped to the ground with a kind of collective sigh that spoke of exhaustion and maybe a few existential crises. Pax immediately started fiddling with a device, his fingers moving with the nimbleness of a man who fidgeted to keep from screaming. "What are you up to, Pax?" Saren asked, squinting at him. He shrugged, not looking up. "Tinkering, trying to make sense of the alien food supply. Might be our ticket out if I can figure it out." Saren nodded, though her expression hinted that hope wasn't exactly on the grocery list today. "Just don't blow us all up, all right?" Pax chuckled. "No promises, but I'll do my best." Cal groaned and lay back, staring up at the murky sky. "Why do I feel like we're the stars of a sci-fi sitcom that forgot the laugh track? Dark humor is all we've got, Cal," Bly said, stretching her sore limbs. "That and the constant threat of imminent death." Saren looked at each of them, her team, her family in this twisted circus. "We have to keep going. We can't let them win." Del glanced at her, a smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth. "Win? Isn't this more like trying not to lose?" "Semantics," Saren said dryly. "But you're right." The Overseer's presence was a shadow that loomed, a reminder that they were playing a game with rules that changed on a whim. Every moment was another test, another chance for the Overseers to tighten the noose. Pax, however, seemed lost in his own world, his tinkering taking on a frantic edge. Saren watched him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Maybe he saw something they didn't, or maybe he was just grasping at straws, but in this place, straws were sometimes all you had. The ground shifted beneath them, the arena's cruel sense of humor manifesting in the form of a sudden quake. Saren barely had time to yell a warning before the earth opened up, swallowing half the team. "Shit," Cal shouted, scrambling to keep from sliding into the abyss. Rocks tumbled, dust filled the air, and for a moment chaos reigned. Saren's instincts kicked in, her hand reaching for Cal's arm, yanking him back with the strength of desperation. Del and Bly were on the other side, separated by a chasm that yawned like a hungry beast. "You two okay?" Saren yelled, her voice barely carrying over the din. Del gave a thumbs up, a gesture that was either reassuring or infuriating depending on your perspective. "Just another day in paradise." Bly was more pragmatic, her eyes scanning their predicament. "Looks like we're taking the scenic route, again." Saren took stock of their situation, her mind a whirl of possible solutions and inevitable injuries. "All right, new plan. Del, Bly, circle around and meet us at the ridge." "Pax, keep doing whatever it is you're doing." Pax had barely looked up from his project, the devices around him a testament to his efficient madness. "Already on it, boss." Cal glanced at Saren, his expression a mix of frustration and grudging admiration. "You think we can actually pull this off?" "I think we're screwed if we don't try," Saren replied, her voice steady as she could make it. "And I don't plan on letting the Overseers have the last laugh." They began the arduous task of making their way around the chasm, every step a delicate dance between caution and urgency. The Overseers watched, unseen but always felt, a constant reminder of the stakes. As they moved, Saren couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led, that every choice was a carefully placed piece in a puzzle she couldn't quite see. But she pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the immediate, the tangible. She had a team to keep together, a mission to complete, and no time to wallow in what-ifs. The terrain was unforgiving, each turn revealing another obstacle, another challenge. Cal slipped at one point, catching himself just before taking a long and unscheduled fall. "This place just loves trying to kill us, doesn't it?" he muttered, brushing dust from his hands. "It's got a thing for drama," Saren replied, her grip on her weapon tightening. "And we're the unwilling actors." Ior seemed to pass in a blur of sweat, grit, and grim determination. The occasional quip or joke from the others served as a reminder that they were still human, still clinging to camaraderie even in the face of absurdity. They finally reached the ridge where Dell and Bly were waiting, the relief palpable. The separation had been brief, but every moment felt like an eternity when the world seemed intent on swallowing you whole. "Glad you two made it," Dell said, his tone casual but his eyes betraying his genuine relief. "Wouldn't miss this reunion for anything," Cal replied, though his grimace said otherwise. They took a moment to regroup, catching their breath and checking their gear. Pax was still absorbed in his work, oblivious to the world around him. Saren approached him, crouching beside him, her curiosity getting the better of her. "You making any progress?" Pax nodded, a flash of triumph in his eyes. "I think so. The alien food supply, it's not just sustenance, it's something else. I just need a little more time." Saren raised an eyebrow. "Time's not exactly on our side, is it?" Pax shrugged, his hands never stopping. "True, but I figure if we're going down, might as well go down swinging." Saren couldn't help but smile, though the weight of their situation was never far from her mind. "Just don't blow us up, all right? I'd rather not add explosion to our list of problems." Pax laughed, a sound that was both reassuring and slightly manic. "No promises, but I'll aim for something less dramatic." The team began to move again, the sound of their footsteps a steady rhythm against the backdrop of the overseer's ever-present gaze. Saren felt the pressure mounting, the stakes rising with each step. The arena was a living entity, shifting and changing, adapting to their every move. It was a predator and they were its prey, but Saren refused to be cowed. She had a team to protect, a mission to complete, and she wasn't about to let a bunch of floating eyeballs have the final say. As they pressed on, the landscape began to change, the ground smoothing out, the obstacles less frequent. It was almost as if the arena was lulling them into a false sense of security. "Anyone else feel like we're being set up for something big?" Dell asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. "Like a final act," Bly suggested, her hand never far from her weapon. "Or a punchline," Cal added, though his smile lacked any real humor. Saren remained silent, her mind a whirl of plans and contingencies. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap, that the overseers had something particularly nasty in store for them. But she pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the moment, on the task at hand. She had a team to lead, a mission to complete, and no time to dwell on what-ifs. As they moved deeper into the arena, the fog began to lift, revealing the next stage of their challenge. Saren's heart raced, the thrill of the unknown mingling with the ever-present fear. But she wasn't alone. Her team was with her, a motley crew of misfits and survivors, and together they were a force to be reckoned with. "All right, team," Saren said, her voice carrying the weight of command and camaraderie. "Keep your wits about you. We've got a long road ahead, but we'll walk it together." And as they pressed on into the unknown, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. It was a small thing, fragile and fleeting, but it was enough. Enough to keep them moving, enough to keep them fighting. Enough to remind them that even in the darkest corners of the universe, humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The overseers might have held the cards, but Saren and her team were ready to play their hand. Whatever came next, they would face it together, with grit, determination, and a healthy dose of sarcasm. After all, if the universe was going to screw them over, they might as well get a few laughs in first. The arena, ever the sadistic stage, shifted beneath their feet with a malice usually reserved for tax audits and dental visits. Saren and her team stumbled forward, the ground vibrating as if trying to shake them off like unwanted fleas. The overseer's unseen gaze loomed over them like a bad hangover. Pax was in his own world, poking and prodding the alien food supply, which looked like a cross between a moldy sandwich and an alien's attempt at haute cuisine. He muttered to himself, oblivious to the chaos, a mad scientist amidst his own little apocalypse. Saren could only hope he was onto something. Otherwise, they'd be adding starvation to their growing list of grievances. "Still at it, huh?" Saren asked, glancing at the rest of her team. Dell was using his rifle as a makeshift cane, and Bly looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, possibly even a tax audit. Pax grunted, not bothering to look up. Almost there, just need a little more time. Time's the one thing we don't have, Pax, Cal interjected, stretching his sore limbs. Unless you've figured out how to stop these overseers from turning us into meat paste. Meat paste? Bly snorted. That's a stretch. Have you seen the ration packs? Pretty sure that's what they are made of. Probably better than whatever Pax is cooking up, Dell added, his eyes darting to the alien food with a mixture of curiosity and revulsion. Saren sighed. This was her team, a bunch of sarcastic misfits who'd probably bicker until the end of time, assuming they didn't get killed in the next 5 minutes. But they were her misfits, and she wouldn't trade them for all the comfortable beds in the universe, not that she remembered what a comfortable bed felt like. Finally, Pax let out a triumphant whoop, which was as reassuring as it was alarming. Got it. Well, sort of, Saren echoed, her eyebrow arching skyward with skepticism. Pax waved his hands, gesturing towards the alien food supply like a magician revealing his latest trick. Turns out this stuff isn't just food. It's a medium like clay or maybe silly putty. We can infuse it with, well, our emotions. Emotions, Cal repeated, deadpan. You're saying we sprinkle some mood on it and it does. What exactly? Pax grinned, his eyes gleaming with the spark of half-baked genius. Disrupts the aliens' performance. Their brains, if you can call them that, can't handle the overload. It's like feeding a dog chocolate, only less tragic and more explosive. Great, so we just have to get close enough to feed them, Bly said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. No problem. Let me just whip out my apron and cookbook, Dell chuckled, leaning on his rifle like an old man with a walking stick. I don't know, Bly. I think you'd make a lovely chef. Shut it, Dell, Bly shot back, though her lips twitched upward despite herself. Saren looked around, taking stock of their dwindling resources and even more fleeting chances. Hope was a double-edged sword, shiny but sharp, and right now they needed to wield it with care. All right, Pax, how do we use this emotion stew of yours? Saren asked, attempting to sound more confident than she felt. Pax shrugged, his usual gesture of choice. We just need to think really hard about something, anything. Anger, fear, hope, no shortage of those, right? Then we mix it in and voila, emotional sabotage. Sounds like a plan, Dell said, sarcasm wading through his words like a tired swimmer. If we don't die of embarrassment first. Hey, I got plenty of fear to go around, Cal added, shaking his head. Might as well make it useful. Saren nodded, her mind racing with possibilities and pitfalls. Then let's do it. We've got nothing to lose except our sanity, and I'm pretty sure that left the building ages ago. As they gathered around Pax's concoction, Saren couldn't help but feel the weight of their situation pressing down on her. It was a ridiculous plan, but ridiculous was par for the course in this twisted game. If they could make it work, they might just have a chance. If this doesn't work, Pax, Bly said, her voice steady, I'm going to haunt you from the afterlife. Pax laughed, a sound that was more bravado than genuine amusement. I'll take my chances. With each of them focusing on a different emotion, they infused the alien food with a cocktail of human experiences. It was a bizarre ritual, like something out of a deranged therapy session, but they had little else to rely on. They needed this to work, needed it like a drowning man needed air. When they finished, Saren took a deep breath, feeling a flicker of hope stir within her. Small, fragile, but present. Now we just need to get this into their hands or claws or whatever they have. Easier said than done, of course. The arena was a playground of death, and the overseers were its twisted caretakers. It was a game of cat and mouse, and Saren wasn't entirely sure which role they were playing. Think they'll go for a picnic? Cal asked, his voice light despite the gravity of their plan. Bly smirked. If we survive, I promise to pack us a lunch, but first let's feed the locals. The team moved forward, their makeshift plan clutched tightly. Saren led the way, every step a precarious balance between hope and despair. They were on the brink of defeat, their final challenge looming like a storm on the horizon, but they pressed on. As they navigated the merciless terrain, the overseers watched with their silent, judgmental presence. Saren could feel their intangible gaze, a reminder of the stakes, of the final act they were about to perform. Finally, they reached a clearing, a small, deceptive oasis in the midst of the chaos. It was serene in a way that set Saren's teeth on edge, too calm, too quiet. The perfect place for a trap. Looks like a welcoming committee, Dell noted, gesturing to the shadows obscuring the edges of the clearing. Think they'll appreciate our gift. If they don't, we can always throw it at them, Saren replied, her grip tightening on her weapon. Ready, team, the others nodded, each steeling themselves for what was to come. It was time to put Pax's plan into action, to test the limits of alien physiology and human ingenuity. Not exactly what Saren had signed up for, but desperate times and all that. As they stepped into the clearing, the shadows began to stir, the aliens revealing themselves like actors on a stage. Saren could feel the tension crackling in the air, a silent countdown to disaster. Here goes nothing, Pax murmured, holding the alien food aloft like a bizarre offering. The aliens hesitated, their movements uncertain, as if sensing something was amiss. Saren held her breath, waiting for the moment when everything would either go horribly right or catastrophically wrong. The aliens advanced, drawn by the lure of the infused food, and Saren could only hope that Pax's concoction would work its magic. It was a gamble, a shot in the dark, but in this arena they couldn't afford to play it safe. As the first alien took a tentative bite, something shifted in the air, a tangible crackle of energy. The alien staggered, its movements erratic, as if trying to process an overload of information. "It's working," Pax breathed, his voice a mix of disbelief and triumph. The other aliens followed suit, consuming the food with a hunger that spoke of desperation, of a need they couldn't quite understand. Saren watched as the effects rippled through them, the aliens faltering as their minds struggled to cope with the influx of human emotion. It was a sight to behold, a chaotic ballet of confusion and disruption, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Saren dared to hope. "Looks like Pax's cooking isn't so bad after all," Dell quipped, his grin wide and genuine. "Next time, remind me to bring a cookbook," Bly said, her eyes bright with something that might almost be called victory. Saren allowed herself a small smile. It wasn't over yet, but they'd bought themselves some time, some breathing room. The Overseer's game was far from finished, but for the moment they had the upper hand. "Let's not get too cocky," Saren cautioned, though her voice carried a hint of optimism. "We've still got a long way to go, right?" Cal agreed, shaking his head. "Can't let the Overseers think we're getting comfortable." As the aliens continued to struggle, Saren and her team regrouped, ready to move forward into the unknown. They'd come this far, survived against impossible odds, and they weren't about to give up now. With a final glance at the clearing, Saren led her team onward, the taste of victory bittersweet on her tongue. The Overseers might have underestimated them, but this was only the beginning. They were human, resilient and stubborn, and they weren't about to let a bunch of alien science experiments write their ending. Whatever lay ahead, Saren and her team would face it together, with grit, determination, and a healthy dose of sarcasm. Because in the end, humor might just be their best weapon against the cosmic absurdity of it all. The arena was as welcoming as a bear trap, but Saren Voss wasn't in the mood to complain. It was the last show, after all, and she was about to steal the spotlight with a killer performance. Or maybe just get killed. Either way, it was going to be memorable. "All right, team," she called out, trying to sound more commander and less desperado. "We put Pax's emotional voodoo to the test. I hope you've all brought your best feelings to the party because it's time for curtain call." Cal grinned, though it looked more like a grimace. "If this works, Pax gets a medal. If it doesn't, he gets a swift kick." "Don't worry, Cal," Pax said with a glint in his eye. "I'm holding out for the medal." Dell tapped his rifle cane against the ground, the sound echoing in the twisted silence. "At least we'll go out with a bang, or maybe a whimper, but definitely some form of audible noise." Bly snorted. "I'd settle for a whimper if it means we survive." "Call me old-fashioned, but I'm fond of breathing." Saren rolled her eyes, more affection than exasperation. "Focus, people. If we mess this up, the overseers won't just laugh us off the stage, they'll bury us under it." The fog was as thick as ever, clinging to the ground like a bad reputation. It swirled around them, a murky soup of anxiety and anticipation. The overseers were watching, undoubtedly, their unseen eyes waiting for the humans to fail spectacularly. "Let's give them a show they won't forget," Saren muttered, more to herself than anyone else. It was time to tip the scales, and Pax's concoction was their only shot. The plan was as simple as it was ridiculous. Inject some raw human joy into the alien food supply. Pax had worked his techno-magic, somehow turning their emotions into a potent cocktail of chaos. The aliens didn't stand a chance. "Everyone ready?" Pax asked, holding up the device like it was the holy grail of insanity. "Remember, think happy thoughts. No room for existential dread in this party mix." "If it doesn't work, I vote we just chuck it at the overseers," Bly said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "It'll be our version of a Molotov cocktail." "Sounds like a plan," Saren replied, taking her place at the head of the group. "Remember, stay together, and if you see an alien, smile like you mean it." They moved as one, a ragtag band of misfits armed with the most absurd weapon in the universe, laughter. As they approached the alien camp, the tension was palpable, a taut string ready to snap. The aliens were as ugly as ever, their appearances like the love child of a bad acid trip and a malfunctioning replicator. They milled about, oblivious to the impending emotional ambush. Pax took a deep breath, his fingers dancing over the device. "Here goes nothing. Smile, everyone, you're on candid camera." The device hummed to life, a low thrum that resonated through the air. Pax had somehow distilled joy into a wave, broadcasting it like a cosmic radio station of insanity. At first, nothing happened. The aliens continued their aimless shuffle, their insectoid eyes vacant and uncomprehending. But then slowly they began to twitch. "Is it working?" Cal asked, shifting uneasily. "Give it a minute," Pax replied, his gaze fixed on the unfolding drama. It's not instant coffee. One by one the aliens began to react. Their limbs jerked, spasmed, as if they'd taken a wrong turn into an intergalactic dance competition. It was chaos in its purest form, an alien mosh pit of confusion and overload. "Oh, it's working all right," Del said, a grin splitting his face. "Look at them go." Bly chuckled, a low, wicked sound. "I knew they'd appreciate some good old-fashioned human humor. It's the universal language." The overseers were probably having a meltdown, their precious game spiraling out of control. Saren could almost feel their frustration, a silent scream in the cosmic void. "Now's our chance," she urged, her voice steady. "While they're distracted, we move. Don't stop for anything." The team surged forward, slipping past the flailing aliens with the ease of seasoned survivors. The overseers had underestimated them, and now they'd pay for their arrogance. "Think this'll be enough to get us out of here?" Cal asked, his tone hopeful despite everything. "If it's not, we'll make it enough," Saren replied, determination burning bright. "We're not just players in their game, we're the wild card." As they navigated through the chaos, the arena around them began to shift, sensing the imbalance. The overseers were panicking, scrambling to regain control. But it was too late, the humans had seized the narrative. The fog parted, revealing a path that led deeper into the heart of the arena. It was a gauntlet, a final test, but they were ready. Together they would forge their own destiny, one step at a time. "Look at them," Bly said, her voice filled with dark amusement. "Dancing like nobody's watching, or maybe like everyone is." Del nodded, his expression one of grim satisfaction. "Looks like we're the last ones laughing." Pax grinned, his confidence infectious. "You know what they say, laughter is the best medicine. Or in this case, the best weapon." Saren smiled, a genuine, heartfelt expression. They'd done the impossible, turned the tables on their captors with nothing more than grit and gallows humor. It was absurd, but it was also their victory. The path stretched out before them, a promise of freedom and the unknown. Saren took a deep breath, ready for whatever lay ahead. After all, they were human, resilient, stubborn, and utterly unpredictable. "Let's finish this," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 battles. Together, they moved forward as one, their laughter echoing through the desolate arena. The overseers might have built this place, but it was the humans who would decide how the story ended. With every step, they reaffirmed their defiance, their refusal to be just another statistic in the overseers' twisted game. They were more than survivors. They were pioneers, carving a path through the darkness with nothing but courage and wit. And as they advanced, the overseers could only watch, powerless to stop the tide of humanity sweeping through their carefully orchestrated chaos. It was a new beginning, a chance to rewrite their fate, and Saren was determined to seize it with both hands. In the end, they were more than just players. They were the architects of their own destiny, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the human race. And no amount of alien trickery or overseer manipulation could ever take that away. As the final curtain fell, Saren and her team stepped into the light, ready to face whatever awaited them beyond the arena's confines. They had survived, thrived, and laughed in the face of adversity. And if the overseers couldn't handle that, it was their own damn fault. Because in the grand scheme of things, the universe wasn't just a stage, it was their playground. The arena, as always, was about as welcoming as a grizzly bear with a toothache. But today, there was a slight scent of change, or maybe that was just the smell of the aliens' confused panic. Saren Voss adjusted her course, leading her troop of misfits through the chaos they'd created. They were in the eye of a storm they'd stirred up with nothing more than a poorly thought-out plan and some good, old-fashioned human stubbornness. "Well, look at us," Cal said, his voice pitched somewhere between awe and the disbelief of a man who just found 100 cred chip in his pocket. "We're really doing this." "Don't you jinx us, Cal," Saren warned, squinting through the swirling fog that still clung to the arena floor like a misjudged metaphor. "I swear if the overseers get any ideas, I'm blaming you," Bly snorted, checking her weapon with the practiced ease of a woman who expected things to go south at any moment. "Jinx or not, this place feels like it's been designed by someone who hates fun, and us, definitely us." Dell adjusted his rifle cane, equal measures dapper and deadly, his eyes scanning for any sign of the overseer's next move. "Fun's overrated. I'd settle for not getting skewered by surprise." Saren shook her head, more amused than anything else. "Stay focused. The overseers won't just sit back and let us waltz out of here, not after we've turned their prized pets into raving lunatics." "Would love to see their faces right about now," Pax chimed in, his device still humming with the remnants of human emotion. "Bet they're regretting that express ticket to Crazy Town." They'd managed to slip past the aliens, their insectoid captors now locked in an impromptu breakdance contest thanks to Pax's emotional meddling. The overseers were likely smashing whatever passed for control panels in a fit of impotent rage. "Think they'll send us a thank you note?" Cal asked, his grin a little more relaxed, though the tension still simmered beneath the surface. "If they do, it'll probably explode in our faces," Saren answered, her voice dry as a desert. "But hey, at least they're paying attention now." The fog shifted, parting just enough to reveal something that looked suspiciously like an exit. It was a door, or more accurately, a massive, foreboding gate that seemed to dare them to approach. It was framed by metallic spikes that glinted in the low light like the teeth of a very hungry, very metal shark. "That looks promising," Dell remarked, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Or it could be a very fancy death trap." 50-50, I'm thinking. "Only one way to find out," Saren said, stepping forward with all the confidence of someone who'd forgotten how many times she'd almost died today. "Pax, can you make contact with the overseers? We need to talk before they decide to throw more surprises at us." Pax fiddled with his device, fingers dancing over the controls like he was trying to tune into the right frequency of doom. "Give me a sec." If they're listening, maybe we can negotiate, or at least stall them long enough to get the hell out of here." Bly leaned against a jagged rock, her eyes scanning the twitching aliens behind them. "Assuming they speak human, though with our luck they'll just try to dissect us for fun." As Pax worked his techno-magic, the rest of the team kept watch. The arena was still, save for the occasional twitch of an alien limb. It was the calm before the next inevitable storm, and they all knew it. "All right, I think I got something," Pax said, his voice tinged with triumph. "Connecting now. Everybody smile, we're on." There was a crackle of static, followed by a voice that was both eerily calm and endlessly patronizing, like a bad automated customer service line. "Attention, human participants, state your intentions." Saren stepped forward, speaking with a confidence she didn't quite feel. "We want this to end. The games, the experiments, all of it, you've seen what we're capable of. Let us go, and maybe we won't trash your whole operation." The overseer's voice returned, dripping with a kind of curiosity that was almost sinister. "You have disrupted our processes. This is unexpected. Your proposition requires consideration." "Consider quickly," Saren replied, her patience as thin as the fog clinging to their ankles. "We've got places to be, and staying here isn't on the itinerary." There was a pause, and Saren swore she could almost hear the gears turning in whatever passed for the overseer's collective mind. The silence stretched, a taut wire ready to snap, until, "Your actions have indeed altered the parameters of our experiment. Analyzing. We will grant your request. The arena will be deactivated. You will be allowed to depart." A round of disbelieving looks passed among the team. It was far too easy, which meant there had to be a catch. Bly voiced what they were all thinking. "And the catch?" "No way, it's that simple. We require your cooperation for further analysis," the overseer continued, its tone businesslike. "In exchange, safe passage shall be provided." Del snorted, leaning on his rifle cane. Translation: "They want to poke around in our brains." "Charming." Saren held up a hand, cutting through the team's growing skepticism. "We agree under one condition: no harm comes to us. We walk out of here intact or no deal." Another pause, shorter this time. "Agreed. You are free to leave. Proceed to the designated exit." The gate began to rumble open, revealing a path that led out of the arena and into an uncertain future. It was the first time they'd seen a way out, and it felt like a mirage. "Well, I didn't think that would work," Cal admitted, his relief palpable. "But I'll take it. Don't get too comfortable," Saren warned, leading the way. "We still have to get through that gate before they change their minds. And remember, they're always watching." With a nod of agreement, the team moved as one, their steps echoing in the silence. The aliens continued their dance of confusion, and the overseers, those invisible puppet masters, were finally loosening the strings. As they approached the gate, the fog dissipated, revealing a path lit by harsh, artificial lights that buzzed like oversized insects. It was a tunnel of sorts, leading them out of a nightmare and into whatever fresh hell awaited them beyond. "Home, sweet home," Del quipped, his voice laden with sarcasm. "Or at least the closest thing to it. Better than an alien mosh pit," Bly added, her expression one of cautious optimism. Pax glanced back at the arena, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. "I'll miss the chaos, but not the company." Saren paused at the threshold, taking a last look at the place that had been both a prison and a proving ground. They'd survived against the odds, defied expectations, and somehow managed to make an impact. It was messy, it was absurd, and it was theirs. "Ready to go?" Cal asked, his voice steady, his question a quiet affirmation of their shared resilience. Saren nodded, a sense of closure settling over her like a worn but comforting cloak. "Ready as I'll ever be. Let's get out of this twisted playground." Together, they stepped through the gate, leaving behind the arena and its overseers. Ahead lay a path unknown, but they faced it with the knowledge they could handle whatever came next, as long as they were together. The tunnel led them into a chamber, stark and utilitarian, where automated systems whirred to life, processing their exit with all the warmth of a bureaucratic machine. As the final barriers lifted, they emerged into the light. It was blinding at first, a stark contrast to the dim confines of the arena. But as their eyes adjusted, they saw freedom stretching out before them. It was a vast, star-studded expanse, the universe laid bare, a canvas for new adventures and uncharted challenges. "Figures it'd be space," Bly said, shielding her eyes from the glare. "You'd think after all that we'd get a view of a nice tropical beach." "One step at a time," Saren replied, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. As they stood on the threshold of a new beginning, a sense of accomplishment settled over them. They'd faced the impossible, laughed in the face of danger, and emerged stronger for it. "Where to now?" Pax asked, glancing at the endless starscape. Saren took a deep breath, savoring the moment. "Anywhere but here. We've got a universe to explore and a lot of stories left to tell." With one last look back at the arena, they turned away, ready to chart a course into the unknown. Together, they'd face whatever came next, armed with irreverence, determination, and a hell of a lot of humor. As they stepped forward, the galaxy awaited, wide, wild, and full of potential. And for Saren and her crew, it was just the beginning of their next great adventure.